Welcome to our exploration of trade policies and their impact on labor rights. In today's global economy, trade agreements and policies play a crucial role in shaping the working conditions of millions. We'll begin by understanding what trade policies are, why they matter, and how they intersect with labor rights. This journey will help us see the bigger picture of how international commerce influences the daily lives of workers around the world. As we move forward, we'll uncover the key elements that make trade policies effective and fair, setting the stage for a deeper dive into specific examples and challenges. Labor rights refer to the protections and freedoms granted to workers, ensuring safe conditions, fair wages, and the ability to organize. These rights are fundamental to human dignity and are recognized by international bodies like the International Labor Organization. Understanding labor rights is essential before examining how trade policies affect them. As we progress, we'll see how these rights are often at the center of debates about trade agreements, especially when countries with differing standards interact. This foundation will guide our discussion on the importance of safeguarding labor rights in a globalized world. Trade policies have evolved over centuries, often reflecting the economic priorities and social values of their times. In the past, labor rights were not always considered in trade agreements, leading to exploitation and unsafe working conditions. Over time, advocacy and international pressure have pushed for the inclusion of labor standards in trade deals. This historical context helps us appreciate the progress made and the challenges that remain. By understanding where we've come from, we can better analyze current policies and their effectiveness in protecting workers. Today's trade agreements often include provisions related to labor rights, aiming to ensure fair treatment of workers across borders. These agreements, such as NAFTA and the EU's trade deals, set minimum standards for working conditions, wages, and the right to organize. However, enforcement remains a challenge, as countries may interpret or implement these standards differently. Modern trade agreements represent a step forward, but they also highlight the complexities of balancing economic interests with social justice. We'll examine how these agreements function and their real-world impact on labor rights. International organizations like the International Labor Organization, ILO, and the World Trade Organization, WTO, play a pivotal role in shaping trade policies related to labor rights. The ILO sets global standards, while the WTO facilitates negotiations and dispute resolution. These organizations provide frameworks for countries to cooperate and align their labor standards, promoting fair competition and protecting workers. Their influence is seen in the adoption of labor clauses in trade agreements and the monitoring of compliance. Understanding their role helps us grasp the global governance of labor rights. Labor clauses are specific provisions within trade agreements that address workers' rights. These clauses can mandate minimum wage levels, safe working conditions, and the right to unionize. Their inclusion is often the result of advocacy by labor groups and international bodies. While labor clauses are a positive step, their effectiveness depends on enforcement and monitoring. Some countries may lack the resources or political will to uphold these standards, leading to gaps in protection. We'll explore examples of labor clauses and their impact on workers in various industries. Forcing labor rights within trade policies is a significant challenge. Differences in legal systems, economic priorities, and political will can hinder effective implementation. Some countries may prioritize economic growth over work protections, leading to weak enforcement. International monitoring and sanctions can help, but they are not always sufficient. The complexity of global supply chains adds another layer of difficulty, as violations may occur far from the negotiating table. Addressing these challenges requires cooperation, transparency, and ongoing advocacy. North American Free Trade Agreement, NAFTA, included labor provisions aimed at protecting workers in the US, Canada, and Mexico. While NAFTA set standards for working conditions, critics argue that enforcement was inconsistent, especially in Mexico. The agreement highlighted the need for stronger monitoring and penalties for violations. NAFTA's legacy continues in its successor, the USMCA, which includes more robust labor protection. This case study illustrates the evolution of labor clauses and the ongoing struggle for effective enforcement. Trade policies can have profound effects on developing countries, where labor standards may be lower and enforcement weaker. While trade agreements can encourage improvements, they may also expose workers to exploitation if protections are not enforced. Developing countries often face pressure to compete globally, sometimes at the expense of labor rights. International support and capacity building are essential to help these countries strengthen their labor standards and enforcement mechanism. We'll look at examples of how trade policies have shaped labor conditions in developing economies. Global supply chains connect workers and businesses across continents, making labor rights enforcement more complex. Trade policies must address the realities of outsourcing, subcontracting, and cross-border operations. Violations can occur at any stage, often in countries with weaker protections. Transparency and accountability are key to ensuring fair treatment throughout the supply chain. Companies and governments must work together to monitor conditions and uphold standards. This scene highlights the interconnected nature of modern commerce and the need for comprehensive labor protections. Corporations play a vital role in upholding labor rights within global trade. Many companies adopt codes of conduct and auditing practices to ensure compliance with labor standards. Corporate responsibility extends beyond legal requirements, reflecting ethical commitments to workers' well-being. However, voluntary measures may not always be sufficient, and external monitoring is often needed. The interplay between corporate actions and trade policies shapes the effectiveness of labor protections. We'll examine how businesses contribute to or undermine labor rights in practice. Labor unions advocate for workers' rights and play a crucial role in influencing trade policies. Unions push for stronger labor clauses, monitor compliance, and support workers facing violations. Their efforts help raise awareness and drive improvements in working conditions. Trade agreements often recognize the importance of unions, granting the right to organize and bargain collectively. However, union strength varies by country and industry, affecting their ability to protect workers. We'll explore the impact of unions on labor rights within the context of trade. Consumers increasingly demand ethical products, influencing trade policies and corporate behavior. Public awareness campaigns and certifications, such as fair trade, encourage companies to uphold labor rights. Consumer choices can drive change by rewarding businesses that respect workers and penalizing those that don't. Trade policies may respond to consumer pressure by including stronger labor clauses and transparency requirements. The power of consumers highlights the interconnectedness of global commerce and social responsibility. Effective monitoring and reporting are essential for enforcing labor rights within trade policies. Governments, international organizations, and NGOs track compliance and investigate violations. Transparent reporting mechanisms help identify problems and hold violators accountable. Technology such as digital audits and supply chain tracking enhances monitoring capabilities. However, challenges remain, including limited resources and political resistance. We'll discuss the tools and strategies used to monitor labor rights in the context of trade. Trade policies often use sanctions and incentives to promote labor rights. Sanctions can penalize countries or companies that violate standards, while incentives reward those that comply. These tools help encourage better practices and deter exploitation. However, their effectiveness depends on consistent application and international cooperation. Sanctions may sometimes harm workers if not carefully targeted, while incentives can drive positive change. We'll examine examples of how sanctions and incentives are used in trade agreements to protect labor rights. Labor rights are closely linked to broader human rights, including freedom from discrimination and the right to safe working conditions. Trade policies must consider these connections to ensure comprehensive protection. Human rights organizations often advocate for stronger labor clauses in trade agreements, highlighting abuses and pushing for reform. Viewing labor rights through a human rights lens emphasizes their importance and universality. We'll explore how this perspective shapes trade policy debates and outcomes. Trade policies can impact men and women differently, especially in industries with gender disparities. Women may face unique challenges, such as lower wages, unsafe conditions, and limited access to leadership roles. Trade agreements increasingly address gender equality, promoting fair treatment and opportunities for all workers. Gender-sensitive policies help ensure that labor rights are truly universal and inclusive. We'll discuss examples of gender-focused labor clauses and their impact on workers. Child labor remains a critical issue in global trade, especially in developing countries. Trade policies often include provisions to prohibit child labor and promote education. Enforcement is key, as violations can occur in informal sectors and supply chains. International cooperation and monitoring help address this challenge, but progress is slow in some regions. Protecting children's rights is a fundamental aspect of labor standards, requiring ongoing vigilance and advocacy. Forced labor is a violation of fundamental human rights and is addressed in many trade agreements. Policies aim to prevent exploitation and support victims, but enforcement remains challenging. Forced labor can occur in various industries, often hidden from view. International collaboration and strong legal frameworks are essential to combat this issue. Trade policies must include robust measures to identify and eliminate forced labor, ensuring dignity and freedom for all workers. Labor rights and environmental standards are often linked in trade policies. Unsafe working conditions can result from environmental hazards, and sustainable practices benefit both workers and communities. Trade agreements increasingly include environmental clauses alongside labor provisions, promoting holistic protection. This approach recognizes the interconnectedness of human and environmental well-being. We'll explore how environmental and labor standards reinforce each other in modern trade policies. Technology is transforming the world of work, creating new opportunities and challenges for labor rights. Automation, digital platforms, and remote work change how trade policies address worker protections. Technology can enhance monitoring and reporting, but it may also lead to job displacement and new forms of exploitation. Trade agreements must adapt to these changes, ensuring that labor rights keep pace with innovation. We'll discuss the impact of technology on labor standards and policy responses. Negotiating trade policies is a complex process involving multiple stakeholders, including governments, businesses, unions, and civil society. Labor rights are often a contentious issue, with debates over standards, enforcement, and economic impacts. Successful negotiations require compromise and a commitment to protecting workers. Transparency and public participation can improve outcomes, ensuring that labor rights are not overlooked. We'll examine how labor issues are addressed in trade policy negotiations. Public participation is essential for shaping trade policies that protect labor rights. Stakeholders, including workers, unions, and advocacy groups, contribute to policy development through consultations and feedback. Public engagement increases transparency and accountability, ensuring that policies reflect the needs and concerns of those affected. Trade agreements that incorporate public input are more likely to succeed and gain legitimacy. We'll discuss the role of public participation in trade policymaking. Transparency is a cornerstone of effective trade policies, especially regarding labor rights. Open negotiations, clear reporting, and accessible information help build trust and ensure compliance. Lack of transparency can lead to abuses and undermine worker protections. Governments and organizations must prioritize transparency to foster fair and accountable trade agreements. We'll explore strategies for increasing transparency in trade policy processes. Trade policies affect economies and labor markets in profound ways. Strong labor standards can promote stability and growth, while weak protections may lead to exploitation and inequality. Balancing economic interests with social justice is a central challenge in trade policymaking. Policymakers must consider the long-term impacts of labor clauses on competitiveness, investment, and worker well-being. We'll analyze the economic consequences of trade policies on labor rights. Social justice is at the heart of labor rights and trade policies. Ensuring fair treatment, equal opportunities, and protection from exploitation are fundamental goals. Trade agreements must address social inequalities and promote inclusive growth. Advocacy groups and international organizations push for social justice in policymaking, highlighting the need for comprehensive labor protections. We'll discuss how social justice shapes the development and implementation of trade policy. Migration is closely linked to trade and labor rights. As workers move across borders in search of opportunities, trade policies must address the needs and protections of migrant workers, who may face unique challenges. Ensuring fair treatment, safe conditions, and access to legal recourse is essential. International cooperation and strong legal frameworks help safeguard migrant workers' rights. We'll explore the intersection of migration and labor rights in global trade. Forming trade policies is an ongoing process, driven by changing economic conditions and social priorities. Labor rights are often central to reform efforts, as stakeholders push for stronger protections and better enforcement. Policy reform can involve revising labor clauses, improving monitoring, and increasing transparency. Successful reforms require collaboration and commitment from governments, businesses, and civil society. We'll examine examples of trade policy reform and their impact on labor rights. Future of trade policies and labor rights will be shaped by technological innovation, shifting economic landscapes, and evolving social values. Emerging issues such as gig work and remote employment require new approaches to worker protection. International cooperation and adaptive policies will be essential to address these challenges. We'll look ahead to the trends and developments that will influence labor rights in global trade. Experts recommend several strategies for improving labor rights within trade policies. These include strengthening labor clauses, enhancing enforcement, increasing transparency, and promoting international cooperation. Policymakers must prioritize worker protection and social justice, balancing economic interests with ethical considerations. Ongoing dialogue and stakeholder engagement are key to developing effective policies. We'll summarize key recommendations for advancing labor rights in trade agreements. Collaboration among stakeholders is essential for effective trade policies and labor right protection. Governments, businesses, unions, and civil society must work together to develop, implement, and monitor policies. Collaborative efforts help address challenges, share best practices, and ensure accountability. Building strong partnerships fosters trust and improves outcomes for workers. We'll discuss the importance of stakeholder collaboration in trade policymaking. Education and awareness are vital for promoting labor rights within trade policies. Workers, employers, and policymakers must understand their rights and responsibilities. Training programs, public campaigns, and information resources help build knowledge and empower stakeholders. Increased awareness leads to better compliance and stronger protections. We'll explore the role of education in advancing labor rights through trade policy. Advocacy and activism drive progress in labor rights and trade policy reform. Labor groups, NGOs, and social movements raise awareness, push for stronger protections, and hold policymakers accountable. Their efforts have led to the inclusion of labor clauses in trade agreements and improved enforcement. Ongoing activism is essential to address emerging challenges and ensure that labor rights remain a priority. We'll highlight the impact of advocacy on trade policy. Strong legal frameworks are essential for protecting labor rights within trade policies. Laws and regulations set standards, define violations, and establish enforcement mechanisms. International agreements and national legislation must align to ensure comprehensive protection. Legal frameworks evolve in response to new challenges, such as technological change and globalization. We'll examine the role of law in safeguarding labor rights in global trade. Evaluating trade policies is crucial for assessing their impact on labor rights. Governments, organizations, and researchers analyze outcomes, identify gaps, and recommend improvements. Evaluation helps ensure that policies achieve their intended goals and adapt to changing conditions. Transparent and rigorous evaluation processes build trust and accountability. We'll discuss methods and challenges in evaluating trade policies related to labor rights. Empowering workers is a key goal of labor rights in trade policies. Empowerment involves providing access to information, legal support, and opportunities for participation. Trade agreements can support empowerment by recognizing workers' rights to organize, bargain collectively, and seek redress. Empowered workers are better able to protect themselves and contribute to economic growth. We'll explore strategies for worker empowerment in the context of trade. Innovation is essential for adapting trade policies to new challenges and opportunities. Policymakers experiment with novel approaches, such as digital monitoring, flexible labor clauses, and cross-sector collaboration. Innovative policies can improve enforcement, increase transparency, and address emerging issues. We'll highlight examples of innovation in trade policy and their impact on labor rights. International cooperation is vital for protecting labor rights in global trade. Countries work together through agreements, organizations, and partnerships to set standards and enforce protections. Cooperation helps address cross-border challenges, such as supply chain violations and migrant worker exploitation. Strong partnerships foster trust and improve outcomes for workers. We'll discuss the importance of international cooperation in trade policymaking. Balancing economic, social, and ethical interests is a central challenge in trade policymaking. Policymakers must weigh the benefits of trade against the need for strong labor protections. Compromise and dialogue are essential for achieving fair and effective policies. Balancing interests ensures that trade agreements promote both prosperity and justice. We'll explore strategies for balancing competing priorities in trade policy. Implementing trade policies requires coordination among governments, businesses, and civil society. Effective implementation ensures that labor rights are protected and standards are upheld. Challenges include resource constraints, political resistance, and complex supply chains. Ongoing monitoring and evaluation help address these challenges and improve outcomes. We'll discuss the process and challenges of implementing trade policies related to labor rights. Global standards set benchmarks for labor rights and trade policies. International agreements, such as those by the ILO, establish minimum protections and guide national legislation. Global standards promote consistency, fairness, and accountability across borders. Adopting and enforcing these standards is essential for protecting workers in a globalized economy. We'll examine the role of global standards in trade policymaking. Trade policies face numerous challenges in protecting labor rights, including political resistance, economic pressures, and enforcement gaps. Addressing these challenges requires innovation, collaboration, and commitment. Policymakers must adapt to changing conditions and prioritize worker protection. Ongoing evaluation and reform help overcome obstacles and improve outcomes. We'll discuss the main challenges facing trade policies and labor rights. There are many success stories where trade policies have improved labor rights and working conditions. Examples include stronger labor clauses, effective enforcement, and international cooperation. These successes demonstrate the potential of trade policies to promote social justice and economic growth. Learning from these stories helps guide future policy development and inspire ongoing efforts. We'll highlight notable success stories in trade and labor rights. Lessons learned from past experiences inform the development of better trade policies and labor protections. Policymakers, businesses, and advocates analyze successes and failures to identify best practices and avoid repeating mistakes. Continuous learning and adaptation are essential for progress. We'll discuss key lessons learned in the pursuit of effective trade policies and labor rights. Conclusion: trade policies play a vital role in shaping labor rights and working conditions worldwide. While progress has been made, challenges remain in enforcement, transparency, and adaptation to new realities. Ongoing collaboration, innovation, and commitment are essential for protecting workers and promoting social justice. As we look to the future, trade policies must continue to evolve, ensuring that labor rights remain a central priority in global commerce.